Thank you to John Santa Maria for letting us use his establishment. It was phenomenal. It was very easy.
Hand works.
John, really appreciate it. Really appreciate it.
Hand works.
So, as you may or may not know, Enumclaw has historically been in legislative district 31, and it's been recently gerrymandered into legislative district 5, which is one of the reasons why we're down here to introduce ourselves.
Did you get my drink?
This is a very new occurrence.
Did you ask me?
And to explain that,
Tell her I walked
introduce
away.
Kevin McCoy. Is going to come up, and he was the legislative district 31 chairman for a very long time, and he's going to kind of explain how we ended up in the bill.
My drink.
Everybody. Like so much I've learned from the Republican Party, I'm not sure I can explain how all that happened. A judge somewhere made a decision, redrew a map, and we're not the 31st anymore. So, one thing I want to make sure all of you know, those of you who are PCOs are still PCOs, and we still have the job to do. The same job we've always done, the same way we've always done it, and always getting better at doing it. If you don't know what a PCO is, like I always say at these meetings, come and find me. It's a precinct committee officer. It's the grassroots of what makes America work. It's the grassroots of the Republican Party. And with our new chairman, he's given us the authority of the grassroots to have our voices heard. So please get involved, look it up if you don't know what it is, and become a PCO. Help us out. We've got a lot of work to do. So with that, like Patrick said, we have new candidates here because Drew Stokesbury, Eric Robb, Phil Fortunato, come November, will not be on our ballots. We will have new people on our ballots come November. We need to get to know them. We need to get to know what they stand for, what we believe in, share our voices with them, and do our jobs. That's part of a PCO's job. So, any questions for me real quick before we move on? Okay, that's good.
So to add on to that a little bit, for those of you who aren't familiar, LD5 runs from Issaquah, Trinity Valley, and Enumclaw. And so there are always certain portions of Enumclaw, the north part of Enumclaw, that we're in the fifth. But we extend, we've lost the Snoqualmie Ridge, right? Plateau. And then we gained most of Enumclaw. And we lost a lot of North Bend as well. So that was the area. It was all part of the LD 14th. Actually, Jim might be able to explain that better than me, but I want to kind of explain to the people that didn't realize that this has happened. Yeah, so your LD runs from Issaquah to all the way down to Enumclaw. So, before we get started, one of the things I want to mention is one of the great things that happened in LD5 this time around is there's been a lot of coordination, there's been a lot of cooperation. And the remnants of the 31st, one of the first things we did was the candidates came down and we sat in on their meetings. They were still having their meetings when they all went down. And so they've been very helpful. There's been a lot of integration, a lot of talking, a lot of coordination, and it's really worked out. And we've had the same thing with the candidates with the slate. And LD5 really works so that the Republicans are working together, not against each other. So, with that said, we've got the man, the myth, the Washington State Republican Chairman, Jim Walsh, is going to come up and speak to you. Brought out the big guns tonight.
Thanks, Patrick. I don't know if that build-up, I'm only going to disappoint now. But yeah, it's worth talking about. We'll repeat it several times tonight. Enumclaw and this area of the state has bounced around a couple of legislative districts. And for a long time it was in the 31st, now it's in the 5th legislative district. And like Patrick said, this all started with a lawsuit that was about Yakima, believe it or not. And so the lawsuit was filed by a left-wing organization in Seattle that complained that the legislative districts in Yakima were designed to minimize the voting power and the voting effect of Hispanic Latino voters in Yakima. Now, I think their premise was wrong, but whatever. They sued under that theory, and they actually got some traction, and they got a judge also in Seattle to make a ruling that the Yakima districts were not right, that they were designed to hold down Hispanic representation, voter participation, and the judge, working with a consultant from UCLA in California, came up with a new legislative map that flipped around those couple of districts in Yakima, but that had an effect on about a dozen other districts, including coming over the hills into this area. And as a result of that judge's map, this part where we're standing got moved from one district where it had been for about 10 years or more into this new district, the 5th legislative district, which, as the guys have said, historically was more focused on Issaquah in that area. So a lot that this judge did, the Seattle judge making a ruling about Yakima, a lot of what he did was pretty partisan. It really wasn't about helping Hispanic voters get a better voting voice. It was pretty partisan. It was about making districts more Democrat, not making them more Hispanic or diverse or anything like that. And so, we're battling this, but one of the silver linings in this whole scheme from this left-wing judge in Seattle is by putting this area into the 5th legislative district, it makes the 5th legislative district actually a little more conservative. So we like this. I mean, we don't like the rest of what he did, but we like this one piece of it. And so where the 5th legislative district has been kind of Democrat-leaning, kind of blue, at least the last few cycles, it's now purple, kind of red right now. And so we're pretty excited about our prospects in this 5th legislative district coming up, in the primary that's coming up in August, but especially in November. We're very excited that the 5th legislative district will be in play, and I think it's very credible to say we could pick up a couple of these legislative seats, maybe all 3 of them in November. And there are a couple other things that are going on that'll help. We know that the initiatives, which are, there was a group of 6 that was initially qualified end of last year. 3 of those 6, the legislature passed into law during the last legislative session. So they're already in law. They won't be voted on in November. The 3 that were already passed into law, the main one, for my money, restoring police pursuits of criminals and criminal suspects, that's in law. The Parents' Bill of Rights, which is primarily a parental notification law, that one is in law. That one's already on the books. And then one that a lot of people think we don't need, but we kind of do, an initiative that restates there'll be no tax based on personal income in Washington State. That one passed by the legislature, it's in law now. That one was really a clarifying one because some of my left-wing colleagues in Olympia were trying to argue that there could be a state income tax, and we wanted to clear that up, so that one clears that up. Now, there are 3 more that will be on your ballot in the general election in November. And those 3, so the 3 that passed into law, they're on the books, they won't be on your ballot, but 3 of them the legislature ignored. They didn't vote into law. They didn't do anything with them. Those go on the ballot in November. And those 3 are all tightly focused tax reforms, tax cuts. One is repeal the cap and trade tax scheme, just repeal it. So that'll bring down gas and diesel prices. It'll bring down grocery prices, it'll bring down a bunch of prices everywhere across the economy. The other one is repeal the state's capital gains excise tax. This is a foot in the door to create, again, a state income tax. And this initiative just repeals it. And then the third one makes optional, allows you to opt out of the payroll tax, the state payroll tax that funds this insolvent long-term care benefit program that the state of Washington runs. It doesn't repeal it, but it allows people to opt out of it, and that'll either force the scheme to improve or go away. Either one is a good thing. So those are 3 tax reforms that are on your ballot in November, and people sometimes get kind of confused with initiatives and referenda. Do I vote yes? Do I vote no? On these 3, to repeal the taxes, reform the taxes, the rule is simple. Vote yes, pay less. So when you see those 3 initiatives in November, vote yes, pay less. There's also a 4th initiative out gathering signatures right now that restores basically the option of having natural gas in your home or your business to cook with, to heat with, all the things. And there are petitions to sign, that one right there. That one is designed as an initiative straight to the people. It doesn't go through the legislature. So if we collect enough signatures by July 5th, then that restore natural gas choice goes on the ballot in November. That would be a 4th initiative that would be on the ballot in November. And again, vote yes, pay less. Vote yes for that initiative. If you haven't signed a petition already, please do. This natural gas issue, it's a bigger deal than any of us in Olympia thought it was going to be. It really has turned out to be something that is motivating people very strongly to get involved. I mean, frankly, because people like cooking with natural gas. I think that's like the main thing. But also people like having the option to heat their home, do other things with natural gas. But it struck a chord much more than I or most other people were expecting. People are really fired up about this. And they don't like the idea that the government's trying to take away the option of having natural gas, for heat or for cooking. So that's going to be an interesting one. I think that's going to drive people both to sign the initiative and also to vote the ballot in November. And so I think the initiatives are going to help. And remember, initiatives go at the top of the ballot. So when people say, oh, it's going to be Trump and Gore at the top of the ballot. No, actually in Washington this November, it's going to be initiatives at the top of the ballot, and Trump and Gore are under the initiatives. So I think this is going to motivate people to send their ballots. And we can talk about other politics too. I mean, we know that Trump is always kind of a polarizing figure, but I definitely have seen the anti-Trump sentiment weaker now than it was the past couple of cycles. I think that, I wish I had better news, but I just think that the really intense hatred of Trump, it has a short half-life. It's hard for people to maintain. And I think people are just more neutral about Trump this time around. And Washington will always be a tough state for Trump, but I don't think you see the intensity of the opposition to Trump that you saw. Some of that, frankly, has to do with the current president, who's not doing a great job by any metric. And I think people, even who are Democrats who lean left, they're realizing Biden has just not been a very effective president. And they're looking at RFK Jr. or maybe they're just not going to vote or whatever they're going to do. So I think that these trends near the top of the ticket are going to help the 5th legislative district. I think they're going to make the 5th legislative district purplish trending red. I think the people of the area want natural gas. They don't like cap and trade. Nobody likes this long-term care payroll deal. So I think they'll vote yes and repeal that. And I think they'll start voting conservative at the top of the ballot in November, and they're just going to keep going down the line and vote R or vote conservative down the ballot. At least I hope they will. And our job in the state party is to give them every incentive to do that when they vote their ballot this November. So our eyes are tightly focused on the prize, which is the election in November and picking up more seats in Olympia and in DC. We've got a couple of congressional races in the state that I think will be competitive. We might be able to pick up a seat or two in the delegation that Washington State sends back to DC, and that would be phenomenal. We were talking a little bit before about the trouble the current speaker has in DC, the Republican speaker who's got just a razor-thin majority there and is kind of handcuffed by that. I'd sure like to see him pick up a few more Republicans in Congress, and that might make him stiffen his spine up a little bit on some policy stuff we'd like to see go through DC. So overall, the foundation looks good. I mean, I don't like to overpromise. Washington is always a tough state. So our candidates need to be knocking on doors, they need to be sending out postcards, they need to be doing all the things. And that's what you can help them with here tonight. But I am optimistic that as long as we're talking about tax reform and good policy, we give our candidates, a good tailwind and help them along to win in November. And that's what it's all about. I don't like, there are no second prizes in politics. I don't like moral victories. I like real victories in November. And that's what we're angling to do. So thanks for turning out here. Events like this are what it takes. We need hundreds of these all around the state every week, and that is happening. And let's give these candidates a good lift so they can get through the primary coming up in August and win in November. God bless you all. Thanks for being here.
All right, hey, another big hand for the Washington State Republican Party Chairman Jim Wall. So as I said earlier, one of the great things is how much cooperation and helping out each other out that we've had so far, at least in LE5. And one of those is this Headworks was actually double booked tonight. You were going to have another event for our next speaker, and he was very gracious and he was very accommodating to combine the events. And so we have our Secretary of State candidate, Dale Whitaker, is going to come up and speak to you. And again, a big hand for Dale. Again, he was going to have to answer
How's everyone? Good. So we have a lot of work to do, and we have a little bit of time to do it. So Patrick called me last week and said they wanted to use the venue. We double booked, like he said, and I said, sure, why not? Let's get as many people in the room as possible. We have a lot of impetus right now, like Jim had said, with the gas ban and repealing the gas ban. This is not a partisan issue. There are a lot of people that are upset about not having the choice to have natural gas appliances. So this has been something that's really been helpful for all of us and will continue to be helpful. So I'll just tell you a little bit about myself, and I won't keep it too long because these guys are going to do a forum for the races here that are really important here locally. I was born in England. I actually grew up in the United Kingdom, and I moved here in 2008. I became a citizen in 2015. And for the 7 years that I was a green card holder, it never crossed my mind to register to vote illegally, even though every time I renewed my driver's license or went to the FFL to buy a firearm, they asked me, would you like to register to vote? I knew that wasn't my right. The right to vote is only the right of the citizen, whether born or naturalized. And it takes a lot of effort when you move here and you're not born here as a citizen. It takes a lot of effort to become a citizen. And it's worth that effort. When you see what the United States stands for, it's absolutely worth it to become a citizen. Just the right to vote and to have your voice heard is worth the effort. So for me, people ask me, Dale, why are you running for Secretary of State? No one cares about the Secretary of State's office. Well, I do. Because for me, I've seen, as you guys have seen, the voter apathy increasing in the past few years. We're going less than 30% voter turnouts in most counties, and that's a worrying issue for me. So when I decided to run for office, I called my dad and I said, Dad, he lives in the UK, so I said, Dad, when was the last time you voted? He goes, oh, I don't know. I said, just take a guess. He said, Oh, maybe in college. My dad's 61 years old. That's 40 years ago. This is where we're headed if we don't realize that voter apathy is what the Democrats want from us. What the Republicans do, we work hard, we raise families, we feed our families, and we want to be left alone. We can't be left alone anymore. We have to get out of the woodworks, we have to get onto the front lines, we have to start electing folks like these guys right here to represent us in the legislature. 2 seats away from a supermajority, guys. And then that state constitution that guarantees you your rights, they're going to amend the entire thing. And then we're all leaving. So we absolutely have to get behind good candidates like these guys right here that are running for the Senate and the legislature. We absolutely must win those seats. They're pivotal. It doesn't mean that you have to go out and knock doors if that's what you don't like doing. It doesn't mean that you have to do much of anything. If you want to give money, give money. It's helpful. If you want to knock doors, knock doors. If you want to call your friends, call your friends. Everyone has a skill set that is applicable in the campaign. But we all need your help. We cannot have and continue to have less than 30% voter turnouts. If we do, your state constitution's gone. So the issues that are important to me, real quick, and then I'll pass it back over to Patrick, is I'm going to clean the voter rolls because they're not being cleaned effectively and efficiently. The current Secretary of State, Steve Hobbs, is outsourcing part of his job to a system called ERIC, and ERIC are supposed to screen the new registrations, voter registrations, but they're not doing it, and they're not doing it well. And to me, when you guys elect me, you're electing me to do a job, not to outsource that job to a third party. I will bring that back in-house. We will absolutely verify voter. The second thing, and this is a really a big hot button issue for me. Most of you aren't probably aware of this. The current Secretary of State, Steve Hobbs, has contracted with a foreign intelligence firm called Logically AI. And Logically AI are surveilling all public social media posts, even comments in like the Seattle Times Online and so on, to see what you guys are saying about elections. So if you question elections, they're taking that information and sending it to Secretary Hobbs. I was at the Seattle Times editorial board meeting, and I pushed back on Hobbs on this, and I said, Secretary Hobbs, he said, hey, when I was elected, 35% of people didn't trust our elections. And I said, okay, Steve, well, do you think the solution to trust is to then spy on the citizens who don't trust you? I said, well, I think that might have the opposite effect, right? So for me, that contract gets torn up day one. That is a violation of your guys' First Amendment right. You guys have the right to think, say, and believe whatever you want, so insofar that you're not inciting violence. Okay? That goes away. I come from a country that doesn't have the First Amendment, and it is something we absolutely must defend and cherish, because it is vital to our republic. Clean the voter rolls, defend the Constitution, honor my oath of office. Those are the 3 big things that I'm going to do when I become Secretary of State. Guys, thanks for having me. Patrick, I'll pass this back over to you. Thank you.
All right, Dale Whitaker, Secretary of State. Yeah, again, a big thank you for helping us out. So the great thing about this event is that you get a power pack evening. You get to, in one shot, see a whole bunch of candidates. The bad side is you get a whole bunch of speeches and a whole bunch of candidates. So I'm going to go ahead and move this right along. Our next is our Senate candidate, Chad. That's my Chad impression. That's right. And I'll let him introduce himself and his background because he's already here.
Awesome. Thanks, Patrick. So, thank you. I'm going to date myself a little bit here. When I was elected to the legislature the first time, we had 3 Republicans representing the 5th District. It was not that long ago. The 2 terms that I served in the House, we had a bipartisan legislature. We had to work together to find common ground. We could kill each other's bad bills, We were passing budgets with over 90% support. People will have you believe that King County is owned by the Democrats right now, and I don't believe that's true. I believe that we have the opportunity to take back quite a few of these seats, and that politics is cyclical by nature. That, the pendulum is swinging back towards common sense. And we need those backstops because people are getting tired of the only backstop on government being the initiative process. And if they get a few more seats, we might not even have the initiative process anymore. So I was lucky enough to serve 2 terms. I was ranking member of the House Education Committee for both those terms. I was, in my first year, elected to caucus leadership, and so I was assistant floor leader. And I was very happy with the results I have. I think most of my constituents were also happy with the results I have, so much so that they encouraged me to run for the Senate. And in that year, I ran against the incumbent, who at that point was a Democrat, and I got 49.7% of the vote, which I gotta tell you, is not very satisfying. But if you look at it now, a lot of things have changed. First of all, the incumbent is running for governor, so it's now an open seat. Secondly, we've got these initiatives on the ballot that are going to draw a lot of independents and soft Democrats who are fiscally conservative, and they're going to work their way down the ticket with that in mind. And turnout is everything, as Dale was just pointing out. And then thirdly, and this is the secret ingredient here, is we have Enumclaw. And this is the island of sanity in King County. And I can't tell you how excited I am to be down here and knocking on doors and talking to people who share my priorities when it comes to government. So who is this guy, right? So I was a military brat. I was born in the Naval Hospital. I sold my soul to the U.S. military for an Ivy League education, and I kind of followed the family tradition of going into the Navy. Spent 12 years in the Navy altogether. By the way, my oldest is also active duty in the Navy right now, and he got an ROTC scholarship to MIT. Both of his grandfathers were naval officers, so it's a bit of a family tradition. When I left the Navy, I went into Microsoft. I spent 20 years as a software developer in Microsoft. And then after the legislature, there's a term we use called eating our own dog food. And I wish more policymakers did this, going into the trenches and seeing the impact of the work that you did. And all too often, there are unintended consequences. So I became a teacher, and I got the new computer science endorsement that I had created. And I worked on the alternative browser certification, that bill that I had passed. And I saw what it was like in the trenches. And I got to tell you, for the last 5 years, I've been teaching full-time in Bellevue. And I've got now my certification in not just Washington, but 2 other states. And the kids are fantastic. I love working with the kids. I got 150 kids come through my classroom every day, and it's much more satisfying than the million kids that I was setting policy for before. But I tell you, when you see it firsthand, when you see what's happening in the classroom, especially during COVID, and you see the indoctrination that's happening, and the loss of the big picture, they're no longer prioritizing academic achievement. It's all about, there's 2 ways you can close the achievement gap, right? You can bring the bottom up, or you can bring the top down. They've effectively brought the top down. You set lower and lower expectations for our kids, and we are not setting them up for success. So why am I optimistic about some of these things? Well, I mean, the year I got 49.7%, I beat President Trump by 15 points. In subsequent years, I was the top King County vote getter of any Republican legislative race, and I beat the congressional candidate in every single precinct. So even though we weren't electing Republicans in those years, I was the top performing Republican. And so I've been able to keep up my name ID. I've knocked down over 35,000 doors in the 5th District, and I'm just getting started on Enumclaw. I'm a teacher, so last day was the last day of school, and yesterday was, and so now I can focus entirely during the summer on getting down here and getting my name ID in the Enumclaw area. So I'm excited about the opportunities for this year. I see this as something that is a natural progression for us to kind of bring things back to the center and get a good balance in Olympia, because frankly, we can't rely on the initiative process as the backstop for sanity in our state. We need people having good dialogues down in Olympia and both sides to be represented with relatively equal status. So I'm really excited about our slate. All our PCOs have basically approved our slate of 3 candidates here. And so we've got a lot of unity in the 5th District, and we're hopeful that as the 31st new members who are coming into the 5th can work with us to get the word out. And I encourage you to pick up some yard signs, pick up some remit envelopes, any kind of literature. They're on the tables here. But get to know our candidates, and we'll have a Q&A later where we can actually answer one-on-one questions. But thank you so much for the time today to introduce myself, and I hope to get to know you even better going forward. Thanks.
Chad Monkendaws, Washington State Senate for Legislative District 5. Okay, next we have, okay, so there's, for those of you who may not know, in each legislative districts you have 2 representatives referred to as position 1, position 2, and you have 1 state senator. And so the representatives are every 2 years, the senators are every 4 years. We have to have all 3 positions. So to understand it, me and Landon are the state representatives. He's in position 1, I'm in position 2. So having said that, Landon Halverson, come on up.
Hey everybody, it's great to see everyone here. Thanks so much for coming out. As Patrick mentioned, my name is Landon Halverson and I'm running for the state legislature here in the 5th Legislative District, position 1. So a little bit about me. Why did I get involved? I first ran for this office 2 years ago. I ran here in the 5th Legislative District, which at the time did not include Enumclaw, as several of my colleagues have attested to. But we still came down to areas like Enumclaw. In fact, we came down to Hedworks Brewing to have these important discussions about policy and what we wanted to see out of Olympia. And for me, there were 2 things at the time that really motivated my getting involved. The first was crime and public safety. I think I speak for a lot of us when I say, even going back to 2022, we recognized then that it was a problem. The second thing that is still somewhat relevant, but was really relevant back at that time, was COVID mandates. That was something that I was really outspoken on. I was really strong against mask mandates, really strong against vaccination mandates. I fought against the vaccination mandate of the East Side firefighters. That was another big part of my run 2 years ago. They wanted to fire and vaccinate firefighters in East King County, and we worked to say, no, that's not the right plan, that's not the right path. So those were the 2 issues that motivated me then. And going into this election, it's the same concepts that motivate me. The idea that we do not get our rights from our government, we get them from God. And our government, our Constitution, exists to defend us from government, not the other way around. So ensuring that everybody has their individual rights protected, that is number 1. I also care about education. Last year as a high school teacher, I taught marketing and accounting. It's a skill, frankly, more high school students, I think, should take: accounting, marketing, learning how to balance a checkbook, learning how to shake somebody's hand, learning how to put together a resume. Skills that, again, frankly, I think should be required just to graduate from school. If we're not teaching our kids that, what are we really teaching them? So ensuring that we have an education system that actually teaches our kids, right? Only 28%, this was a report that came out the other day, only 28% of students, 8th grade students in Washington State are proficient in mathematics. 28%, 72% are not. That's a huge problem, right? When you are an anomaly for making standard, that's really, really scary. And so our education system is not working. I believe giving parents choice in education is a powerful way we combat that. Let's ensure that every kid, regardless of where they live, can go to a good school that meets their needs. And then the third is affordability. I know I speak not just for myself, but for many people in this room when I say affordability is a huge issue. We can't afford groceries. We can't afford gasoline. Those basic things due to inflation. And frankly, at the federal level, we should have seen a lot more responsibility taken, but we didn't, of course. We can't count on our current president to take much responsibility for anything. And this was no exception. So again, I'm running because I believe in Washington State, but I believe that our current representatives are not doing the right thing. I don't believe they're protecting our individual rights and liberties. I don't believe that they're protecting our kids, and I don't believe that they're setting our state on the right path. So that kind of is where I stand on policy. Just to let folks know, I do have support here in the Enumclaw community. I'm endorsed by the mayor of Enumclaw, Jan Millerino. I'm also endorsed by 31st Legislative Representative Eric Robertson. He's endorsed my campaign. But the endorsement that I'm most proud of, and one that Chad alluded to, is the unanimous sole endorsement of the 5th Legislative District Republican Party. I'm so thankful to have the unanimous support of our precinct committee officers, those who showed up, who consistently make an effort to show up for Republican candidates in our district. I got their unanimous support, and that means a lot to me. I believe in respecting the grassroots. I believe in hearing the grassroots. That's who really makes up our party. And I'm just thankful that the trust and faith has been put into me by every elected official, by every Republican group that has spoken out about the 5th LD race, because they realize how important it is that we win this seat, that we flip back Olympia, and that we make real change to defend our rights. So I look forward to the question and answer session later, but thank you again all for being here, and thank you to HeadWorks for being such a constant voice of truth in this community for so long. Thanks.
All right, Landon Halverson, State Representative LD5, position 1. Okay, well, I'm not going to introduce myself. I'm just going to go right into it. I'm Patrick Peacock. I'm running State Representative, position 2. And I'm a relatively newbie to this. At some point, you've got to look at yourself, you've got to look at what's happening, and there's a moment when you have to step up and say, I don't like what's going on, I'm going to do something about it. And for me, that was, I was working as a contractor over Afghanistan. I'm a counterintelligence agent, human intelligence warrant officer by trade. And so I was doing some contracting over there. I came back right when COVID hit. I've got a young son, he's 14 now. Just found out he broke his thumb tonight. But anyway, I got a front row seat because I wasn't working, because COVID hit right when I got back, of what they were teaching in the schools. I had it set up, TV and all those computers he needed so that he could, maintain his education. And everything had politics in it. Every assignment had a politics. There was some spin in it. So I ended up going to a lot of school boards for like the next 3 years. I was the guy in the back room with the camera, providing transparency. And I ended up running for school board. So part of that process, somebody said, hey, go to an LD5 meeting. It'll be fun, they said. You'll meet new people. So I got talked into going to the LD5 meetings when I was running for school board. And after that was all over, I got a call. Hey, have you ever considered running for a state officer? It'll be fun, they said. And so I got somebody who's in the room at the moment, gave me a call and said, hey, would you consider it? And I said, well, let me think about it. And then Mr. Platt called a couple weeks later and said, well, I'm not going to ask you to consider it. I'm going to tell you I need for you to run. Okay. So that was my journey on how I became a candidate. I'm from the Hobart area of Maple Valley. My family's been there for now 6 generations, since the 1800s. Same place, same farm. My father was actually a president of the Maple Valley Historical Society for some decades now. So I'm very, very steeped in the lore and the history of Maple Valley and Umpqua and Black Diamond. We used to hay for 2 cents a barrel, and that was now Gilman Village. Tells you. Anyway, you're not here to hear my backstory. When I was considering running, there was a Thomas Sowell quote, paraphrase, that says, for the last 3 decades, we've been doing what sounds good, not what works. And I thought a lot about that, in addition to the fact that the school stuff, what I didn't like, and the fact that if you're really going to, I learned studying the school board that most of the complaints that we had about school boards and what was going on in schools was not under control of the school board. It was under control of the state of Washington, through the OSPI, through a lot of stuff. Okay? And they were model policies that were being forced down the throats of the school board. So if you really wanted to make a change, you had to get to the state level. In addition, roughly half of the state budget is K through 12, so you have a lot of influence as far as how that money is spent as well. So my heart is still in the schools. At the same time, does anybody think that what the political establishment in Olympia is doing is working right now? It goes back, maybe some of these things might have sounded good to somebody, but they don't work. And they're proving not to work. And the longer and longer they do what sounds good to bamboozle people into supporting these policies, the more it's being exposed that it's work. And the one that really kills me is the natural gas one. I always go back to this. Because their stated reason for doing it is to get off carbon to save the environment, right? So I know, let's make a plan where we force through economic blackmail, essentially, and make it extremely expensive and get everybody to get off their clean-burning natural gas onto electrical heating. Now, I don't know about you guys, but when we used to have electrical heating, we did for a couple of years before we went back to wood stoves, which we can't use now. But that little dial spins really fast. It looks like a CD spinning, on your meter when you heat with electricity. So how are you going to make all that electricity? Well, we're pretty blessed that we've got, 8 hydroelectric dams, federal dams. We've got something like 60 total dams, but, of course, they want to tear a lot of those down as well. So our backup, when we surge, we need a ton of electricity, is natural gas. So you end up burning exponentially. I don't know what the exact figure is, but it's something like 20 times because of the inefficiency of using natural gas to make the electricity. To go through the grid system to heat with electricity, you're using a lot more natural gas to heat your houses with electricity than if you just burned it in the first place. That's what they call doing things that sound good versus doing things that work. It doesn't work. And so at some point you got to go, I don't know if they're just simply incompetent. I don't know if they're just trying to get a whole bunch of money. I mean, I love looking at the Climate Commitment Act. It's like roughly 1/3 of it goes to a transportation budget. So you tell me, what does transportation budget have to do with Climate Commitment Act? 1/3 of it goes to operational expenses. That's I don't know what you need $700+ million for operational expenses, but I'm pretty sure it's probably not going to the climate. The other ones I think is research and development. I'm not sure what exactly what the last 30 is, but it doesn't work. It doesn't even work for what they're saying they're trying to do. It doesn't work. So I said, well, I guess somebody's going to have to, as a warrant officer. A lot of people don't understand what warrant officers are. We're commissioned officers, but instead of being managers, we're subject matter experts. And our job is to write policy and procedures. It's really what we do. The commander is not an expert in everything. In my case, human intelligence. And so we write the policy and procedures. He signs off on them, and the NCOs execute them. So we have to write policy and procedures that work, that accomplish things. And so that's what I'm hoping to bring to Olympia is some experience, some sanity, some policies, some procedures that will work for us economically, that will work for us even environmentally, if that's your goal. It's just whatever you do has got to work. It can't just simply be a grifting, gathering of power. So anyway, I'm Patrick Peacock. I am running in State Representative LD5 in position 2. We are going to transfer. It's a transition to a question answer. Yeah, college educated. So anyway, we'll take a moment here. Let's take 5 minutes, and everybody can refresh their beers and tip the bartender and thank John again, and we'll get going with a question and answers in about 5 minutes.